I wasn't surprised when they laughed behind closed doors. I was surprised they did it while I was in the room. The conference table stretched between us like a battlefield, my 3 months of research scattered across its polished surface. Ethan Cray, our new CEO from New York, hadn't looked at a single page. He was too busy exchanging smirks with his hand-picked team. Too procedural, he'd said, like competence was a disease. 48 hours later, they'd lose $2.2 million. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Rachel Monroe. And until 3 weeks ago, I was Deputy Director of Strategy at Lockridge Ventures, 38 years old, 12 years in venture capital. And apparently, not leadership material. That morning started like any other. Charlotte's skyline glowed amber through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our conference room. I'd arrived at 6:30 a.m. to set up my presentation, Q3 Investment Pivot Strategy, the culmination of 3 months analyzing market trends, startup valuations, and risk assessments. Every slide was bulletproof, every projection backed by data. By 9 a.m., the room filled with the usual suspects, board members, senior partners, and our new CEO, Ethan Cray. Fresh from his transformative success at a New York firm, Ethan had swept in 6 weeks earlier, promising to make us leaner, meaner, and more culturally aligned. I should have known what culturally aligned meant when he replaced our CFO with his 29-year-old protege from Manhattan. So, Rachel, Ethan interrupted before I'd finished my second slide. This is all very thorough. But where's the vision, the disruption? I clicked to slide 12, where I'd outlined 3 emerging sectors poised for exponential growth. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was typing on his phone. As I was saying, these sectors... The thing is, he cut in again, finally looking up. We need leaders who can inspire, not just analyze spreadsheets. The room went silent. Board members studied their tablets. My longtime colleagues found fascinating things to examine in their coffee cups. I've spent 12 years. Exactly. 12 years doing the same thing. Ethan leaned back. That practiced CEO pose meant to convey casual authority. We're entering a new era. Rachel, we need fresh perspectives. People who understand modern market dynamics. Modern market dynamics. From a man who'd asked me last week what a safe note was. I think what Ethan means, board member Patricia Huang interjected carefully, is that we're exploring a more collaborative approach to strategy. Collaborative? Another word that should have set off alarms. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. Let's table this for now. Rachel, why don't you compile your findings into a brief, something more digestible, and we'll circle back. Brief, digestible, circle back. The meeting ended with handshakes and hollow promises to review my excellent work. As the room emptied, I heard Ethan tell his assistant, block out Thursday afternoon. I want to discuss the new strategic leadership structure. I gathered my materials, 3 months of work dismissed in 20 minutes, and noticed Ethan had left his portfolio behind. A post-it note peeked out. Tara Ellis, strategy lead? 3 question marks. Like he was shopping for my replacement. Thursday came faster than expected. Ethan's assistant had scheduled our alignment meeting for 4 p.m., late enough that most of the office would be gone, minimizing witnesses. Rachel, come in. Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk, the one deliberately positioned 6 inches lower than his. I want to start by saying how much we value your institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge. Corporate speak for you're a relic. However, he continued, hands steepled like a TV villain. We need to reimagine your role to better serve our evolving needs. The folder on his desk had my name on it. Next to it, another folder. Strategic Leadership Restructuring. Effective Monday. We're transitioning you to a consulting capacity. You'll serve as an informal advisor, when needed, to our new head of strategy. And who would that be? Tara Ellis. You might know her from her Finance Forward podcast. 200,000 subscribers. She brings exactly the kind of energy and visibility we need. I knew Tara. Everyone in fintech knew Tara. She'd gone viral last year for a TikTok about manifesting your portfolio gains. Her actual investment experience consisted of day trading crypto and losing $50,000 of her trust fund. She has no venture capital experience. That's where you come in. Ethan smiled like he was doing me a favor. You'll spend the next 2 weeks bringing her up to speed. Think of it as knowledge transfer. You want me to train my replacement? Advisor role, Rachel. It's different. He slid a document across the desk. Your new terms. Same salary through end of quarter. Then we'll reassess based on consulting needs. Same salary for 3 months, then nothing. And if I refuse? Then we'd have to part ways immediately. No transition period, no severance. He leaned back. I'd hate to see 12 years end that way. Monday morning, Tara Ellis bounced into my office, my former office, wearing a $3,000 suit and carrying a venti matcha latte. Oh my God, Rachel, I'm so excited to learn from you. She actually clapped. Ethan says you're like the most detail-oriented person ever. That's so amazing. I'm more of a big picture girl myself. Big picture, she couldn't read a balance sheet. Let's start with our current portfolio, I said, pulling up the database. Actually, can we skip to the exciting stuff? Like, how do I spot the next unicorn? What's the vibe check for a good founder? Vibe check. 2 weeks of this. 2 weeks of explaining why Mercury in retrograde wasn't a valid reason to delay an investment. 2 weeks of watching her Instagram live from my desk. Sorry, her desk. Talking about disrupting the old boys club, while I fed her talking points through Slack. The breaking point came Wednesday of the second week. I'd stayed late organizing transition files when I noticed Tara had left her laptop open. On the screen, a draft investment memo for Cryptosphere, a revolutionary DeFi platform seeking $2.2 million. I knew Cryptosphere. I'd flagged them 6 months ago for suspicious financials. Their burn rate didn't match their reported users. Their technical team was 3 freelancers in Belarus. Their CEO had been sued twice for securities fraud under different names. But there it was. Tara's recommendation, strong buy. Founder has incredible energy and vision. Technology feels transformative. Feels transformative. I found the approval chain. Ethan had already signed off. 2 board members had rubber-stamped it. The wire was scheduled for Friday. I took screenshots. Then I did what 12 years of experience told me to do. I wrote a detailed risk assessment. I documented every red flag. I sent it to the investment committee, copying legal and compliance. Thursday morning. Ethan stormed into the office I was packing. What the hell is this? He waved a printed copy of my memo. Due diligence. You're trying to sabotage Tara. You're bitter about the transition. I'm trying to save the firm $2 million. The deal is done. The partnership is strategic. You wouldn't understand. It's about more than spreadsheets. It's about fraud. Ethan, check their filing documents. The CEO doesn't exist. The address is a WeWork that closed last year. Enough. His face had gone from red to purple. You're done. Clear out now. Security will escort you. 20 minutes later, I walked out of Lockridge Ventures with a banker's box and no severance. Colleagues avoided eye contact. My keycard was deactivated before I reached the parking garage. That night, I forwarded my Cryptosphere file to my personal email. Then I called Jared Finch. Rachel, it's been what, 2 years? I need a favor. Jared? Remember when I kept your name out of that Theranos report? Silence. Then, what kind of favor? The kind where we both hate seeing investors get defrauded, especially when the people who could have prevented it got fired for trying. I'm listening. Friday morning arrived with Charlotte's typical November drizzle. I sat in my home office, watching my Lockridge email bounce back as user not found. 12 years, deleted in 12 hours. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra in accounting. Wire went through this AM. 2.2 miles to Cryptosphere. Tara's popping champagne. Champagne for a fraud. I opened my laptop and started drafting. The email to the board was surgical. Concerns regarding recent investment decision. I outlined every red flag, attached supporting documents, and emphasized the reputational risk. Professional. Measured. The kind of thorough analysis they used to value. By noon, I'd heard nothing. By 3 p.m., I had my answer. A cease and desist letter from Lockridge's legal team. They cited my NDA, my non-compete, and threatened aggressive legal action if I contacted any board members, investors, or partners again. Furthermore, the letter read, any attempts to interfere with Lockridge Ventures operations will be considered tortious interference and prosecuted to the fullest extent. Ethan had CC'd his personal lawyer. The message was clear, shut up or we'll bury you in legal fees. I called my own lawyer. Can they do this? They can try. You could fight it, but it'll cost you 6 figures minimum. And they know you just lost your income. That weekend, I rage-cleaned my entire house. I organized files I hadn't touched in years. I found my notes from Lockridge's early days, when we actually cared about due diligence, when culture fit meant analytical rigor, not Instagram followers. Monday brought an unexpected call. Ms. Monroe, this is David Park from Park & Associates. I'm reaching out on behalf of a client interested in your expertise. Headhunters. Word traveled fast. I'm under a non-compete, Mr. Park. This would be consulting work, market analysis, completely independent of your former employer's scope. Who's the client? They prefer to remain confidential initially, but they're particularly interested in your experience with fraud detection in crypto investments. My pulse quickened. I see. They've allocated a generous budget for comprehensive market research, 6-month contract, mid-6 figures. Interested? Mid-6 figures for market research. Right. Send me the details. The contract came from Slate Capital. Of course, Ethan had burned them 2 years ago, stealing their top analyst and 3 major LPs. They'd been looking for payback ever since. I met their managing partner, Marcus Wright, at a private club downtown. Rachel, your reputation precedes you. He didn't mention my recent firing. Class move. We're exploring the DeFi space but want to avoid the obvious pitfalls. Landmines, you might say. Landmines like cryptosphere? His smile was razor-sharp. Exactly like cryptosphere. We need someone who can identify patterns. Red flags. The kind of analysis that saves firms from unfortunate investments. I'm constrained by certain agreements, Mr. Right. Of course. We'd never ask you to violate any legal obligations. We're simply looking for publicly available information, analyzed by an expert eye. Academic research, you might say. Academic research that happened to focus on exactly the kind of fraud Cryptosphere was perpetrating. I'll need resources, research assistance, access to databases. Done. He slid a folder across the table. Start immediately. That night, I called Jared. Hypothetically, I said, if someone were researching crypto fraud patterns for academic purposes, and they happened to notice similarities to a recent investment, what would be the ethical thing to do? Hypothetically, they should ensure their research is thorough, well-documented, and shared with appropriate academic or journalistic outlets. And if this research happened to prevent future investors from making similar mistakes, that would be a public service, wouldn't it? Over the next 2 weeks, I built a masterpiece, not just on Cryptosphere, that would be too obvious. I created a comprehensive analysis of DeFi fraud patterns, shell company structures, and due diligence failures. Cryptosphere was just one example among many, but what an example it was. The research revealed worse than I'd imagined. The Belarus developers had been paid to create a front end with no actual blockchain infrastructure. The smart contracts were copy-pasted from a failed 2021 project. The revolutionary technology was WordPress with a crypto theme. But here's where it got interesting. Cryptosphere's CEO had tried the same scam 3 times before. Each time, he'd found VCs willing to invest based on vision and energy, rather than boring old due diligence. Each time, investors lost millions. I packaged it all into a pristine white paper. When Vibes Replace Verification, a study in modern investment fraud. Jared knew exactly which financial journalists would find it fascinating. You sure about this? He asked. Once it's out there. I'm not named anywhere. It's just academic research. Right. Academic research that happens to describe Lockridge's latest investment in perfect detail. Funny how patterns repeat themselves. He smiled. I'll make some calls. Hypothetically. Wednesday morning, I submitted my first invoice to Slate Capital. Marcus Wright approved it within an hour. Excellent work, Rachel. Looking forward to your continued insights. Thursday evening, Jared texted, check your email. A message from Alexis Chen at Investor Lens Weekly. We'd like to run your white paper as a special feature. This is exactly the kind of analysis our readers need. I poured myself a wine and smiled. Run it. The white paper went live at 6 a.m. Eastern on a Tuesday. By 7 a.m., my phone was buzzing with notifications from LinkedIn, former colleagues viewing my profile, though none daring to reach out directly. I spent the morning at Slate Capital's offices, ostensibly reviewing their portfolio for similar risks. In reality, I was monitoring the stories spread through financial Twitter. The hashtag #VibesVerification was trending by lunch. Impressive reach, Marcus Wright noted, appearing in the doorway of my temporary office. Your research is sparking quite the discussion. It's an important topic, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Too many firms are prioritizing personality over process. Indeed. Speaking of which, we've been approached by several LPs asking for our take on the cryptosphere situation. Apparently, there are concerns about exposure. Limited partners asking questions. The blood was in the water. That afternoon, Jared called from a blocked number. Phase 2, he said without preamble. Bloomberg wants to run a follow-up. They're looking for additional sources on cryptosphere specifically. I can't. You won't need to. Remember that researcher in Singapore who flagged their fake address? Dr. Kim? She's willing to go on record. And there's a former employee who's been trying to whistleblow for months but couldn't get anyone to listen. Why didn't they come forward earlier? Same reason you're not using your name. Cryptosphere has a very aggressive legal team. But now that the story's out there, momentum. Once doubt creeps into an investment narrative, it spreads like wildfire. What do you need from me? The technical analysis you did on their smart contracts. Sanitized, of course. No fingerprints. I spent the evening creating a technical brief that any competent analyst could have produced, if they'd bothered to look. Token distribution that favored insider wallets. Transaction patterns consistent with wash trading. Infrastructure that couldn't possibly support their claimed user base. By Thursday, the Bloomberg article had dropped. Inside Cryptosphere, how basic due diligence could have prevented a 2.2 matters mistake. The journalist had been surgical. No direct mention of Lockridge, but the investment amount was specific enough. The timeline matched perfectly. Anyone in Charlotte's venture scene would connect the dots. My phone rang. Unknown number. You vindictive bitch. Ethan's voice, stripped of its CEO polish. You think you're clever? I'll destroy you. No firm in this city will touch you when I'm done. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan, I've been focusing on my consulting work. Bullshit. This has your fingerprints all over it. Does it? Because from what I read, any competent analyst could have spotted these issues. Maybe that's the real problem. I'll sue you into bankruptcy. For what? Conducting academic research? Publishing publicly available information? Your lawyers already confirmed I haven't violated any agreements. Silence. Then, this isn't over. No. I agreed. It's just beginning. Friday brought the avalanche. The SEC announced they were investigating Cryptosphere for potential securities fraud. The Belarus developers disappeared overnight. The CEO's Twitter account went private, then deleted entirely. But the real art was in what happened next. Marcus Wright had lunch with three major Lockridge LPs that afternoon. Purely coincidental. Of course, just catching up with old friends. If the conversation happened to turn to risk management practices, well, that was natural given current events. I heard Lockridge might be exposed, one LP mentioned over dessert. Unfortunate if true, Marcus replied. Though I wonder how such an obvious fraud passed their due diligence, unless they didn't actually perform any. Surely not. Ethan Cray wouldn't risk the firm's reputation like that. One would hope. Though I did hear they recently replaced their entire risk assessment team with, what was it? Social media influencers? The LP nearly choked on his coffee. You're joking. I wish I were, but that's just market gossip. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. There wasn't. By Monday, 2 pension funds had requested emergency meetings with Lockridge's board. A third LP had formally asked for a review of all recent investments. The vultures were circling, and they smelled blood. I watched it all from my home office, drafting my next white paper for Slate. This one was about the importance of institutional knowledge in investment decisions. Pure coincidence that it highlighted how firms that pushed out experienced analysts tended to make costly mistakes within 6 months. Sandra from accounting texted me screenshots of internal chaos, emergency all-hands meetings, board members flying in from New York, Ethan locked in conference rooms with legal, his usual swagger replaced by visible panic. The best part? Tara Ellis had gone completely silent. Her daily Instagram stories about disrupting venture capital had stopped. Her podcast hadn't posted a new episode. The champagne had gone flat. Tuesday evening. Jared appeared at my door with a bottle of wine and a grin. Check the journal, he said, pulling up the article on his phone. SEC expands cryptosphere investigation to include investor practices. The subtitle was Poetry. Questions arise about venture firms that ignored standard due diligence protocols. They can't prove anything, I said, though I was smiling. They don't need to. The damage is done. Lockridge is radioactive now. No startup wants to be associated with the firm that fell for crypto fraud because they hired based on Instagram followers. We clinked glasses. What's next? He asked. Slate wants to formalize my role, head of risk assessment. The salary is generous. And Lockridge? We'll survive. Probably. But Ethan won't. The board's already interviewing replacements, quietly, of course. Of course. I looked out at Charlotte's skyline, the same view I'd had from Lockridge's conference room. You know what the beautiful irony is? What's that? If they'd just let me do my job, none of this would have happened. The investment would have been flagged. The firm would have been protected. But they were so sure I wasn't leadership material. Jared raised his glass again. To procedural people. To procedural people, I agreed. The ones who actually keep the lights on. Wednesday morning hit Lockridge Ventures like a hurricane. The SEC announcement had given every financial journalist permission to dig deeper, and what they found was a goldmine of dysfunction. I watched it unfold from my kitchen, coffee in hand, laptop open to multiple news feeds. The Wall Street Journal had the most damning piece. Lockridge Ventures, a case study in what happens when vibes trump verification. They'd gotten everything. Emails showing Ethan overriding risk assessments. Tara's Instagram posts about intuitive investing made while conducting due diligence. The rush to wire $2.2 million based on a 2-page memo that mentioned revolutionary potential 17 times, but included 0 financial projections. My phone buzzed. Marcus Wright. Enjoying the show. His voice carried barely suppressed glee. I'm working on the Patterson account analysis you requested. Of course you are, though I imagine it's hard to concentrate with all this excitement. Did you see Lockridge's statement? I hadn't. I pulled it up on my second monitor. Lockridge Ventures takes all allegations seriously and is conducting a thorough internal review. We remain committed to our fiduciary responsibilities and maintaining the highest standards of due diligence. Corporates speak for, we're fucked. Pathetic, Marcus continued, though I heard from reliable sources that their emergency board meeting lasted until 3 a.m. Apparently, someone was screaming about sabotage and coordinated attacks. How unfortunate for them. Indeed. By the way, we're having drinks with the Harbor Fund partners tomorrow. They're looking to reallocate some capital. Thought you might have insights on firms with actual risk management protocols. The Harbor Fund, one of Lockridge's biggest LPs. I'll prepare some thoughts. Thursday brought the death blow. Though it came from an unexpected source, Cryptosphere's CEO had been arrested in Malta. Real name, Anton Petrov. Wanted in 4 countries for wire fraud. His laptop, seized by authorities, contained a PowerPoint titled Operation Dumb Money that literally outlined how to scam venture capitalists who didn't do proper due diligence. Slide 23 was screenshotted and viral within hours. It read, "Target firms that prioritize culture fit over competence. Look for recent leadership changes, especially if they've replaced experienced staff with younger visionaries. These firms are desperate to appear cutting edge and will invest based on narrative rather than numbers." Someone had helpfully circled Lockridge Ventures' logo on the target list. The screenshot appeared on every financial subreddit, Twitter feed, and LinkedIn post. The memes were brutal. Someone photoshopped Tara's face onto a Napoleon Dynamite still with the caption, "This investment has incredible energy and vision." By noon, Lockridge had disabled comments on all their social media. By 2 p.m., their website was down for maintenance. By 4 p.m., I got the call I'd been expecting. "Rachel?" Patricia Huang's voice was carefully modulated. "Board member. One of the few who'd shown discomfort during my final meeting. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." "Patricia?" "I'll cut to the chase. The board has accepted Ethan's resignation, effective immediately. We're also restructuring our investment committee." I said nothing. Let her fill the silence. "We were wondering. That is, several board members feel we may have been hasty in accepting your departure." "My departure? I was terminated without cause and escorted out by security." A pause. "Yes, that was regrettable. We'd like to discuss a possible return. Chief Risk Officer. Full autonomy over investment assessments, significant equity package. I appreciate the offer, but I've accepted a position with Slate Capital. We could match, exceed, whatever they're offering. It's not about money, Patricia. It's about culture fit." I let that land. I don't think I align with Lockridge's values anymore. "Rachel, please. We need someone with your expertise. The LPs are demanding it." "Then perhaps you should have thought of that before letting Ethan fire me for doing my job." "You're right. We failed you. But surely..." "Patricia, I have a meeting. I wish Lockridge the best in finding someone who fits your evolving needs." I hung up before she could respond. 30 minutes later, Sandra texted, "Ethan just walked out with a banker's box, security escort. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Then, wait, Tara's packing too. She's crying. Then, holy shit, email just went out. They're freezing all new investments pending comprehensive review of procedures." The final tally came in that evening. 4 major LPs had pulled out, citing loss of confidence in risk management. The Cryptosphere investment was gone, complete write-off. Legal fees for the SEC investigation would run millions. Reputation damage, incalculable. Total quantifiable loss, $2.2 million in 48 hours, exactly as the headline would say. Jared sent a single emoji. I poured myself a scotch, the good stuff I'd been saving, and stood at my window. Same skyline, different perspective. My laptop pinged with LinkedIn notifications. Dozens of connection requests from VCs wanting to catch up and explore opportunities. Procedural people, it turned out, were suddenly very much in demand. Another text from Sandra. New emergency email. They're bringing in external auditors to review every investment from the last year. Ethan's entire portfolio is under scrutiny. I smiled, taking a slow sip. The best revenge isn't just watching your enemies fall, it's watching them realize, in excruciating detail, that they architected their own destruction. And the most beautiful part, I'd done it all without violating a single clause of my NDA. Just good, thorough, procedural work. The kind they'd said wasn't leadership material. My phone rang. Unknown number. "You clever bitch!" Ethan's voice was raw, broken. "You orchestrated all of this." "Ethan, you orchestrated this yourself. I just documented it." "Adira, I'll make sure everyone knows." "Knows what? That you fired someone for identifying fraud? That you lost millions because you preferred Instagram followers to financial analysis? Please, tell everyone. I'm sure that will help your job search." Silence. Then a sound that might have been a sob. I ended the call and blocked the number. Outside, Charlotte's financial district gleamed in the setting sun. Tomorrow, I'd start at Slate, building the kind of risk assessment framework that would have saved Lockridge millions. Tonight, though, I'd savor this moment. Procedural people always get the last word. We're very thorough that way. The following Monday, Investor Lens Weekly published their feature story. I'd known it was coming, Alexis had given me a heads up, but seeing it live still sent a thrill down my spine. This is what happens when you undervalue procedural people. The article was a masterpiece of business journalism. It never mentioned Lockridge by name, but the parallels were unmistakable. A venture firm replacing experienced analysts with social media personalities, a rushed investment in an obvious fraud, the systematic dismantling of risk management protocols in favor of cultural alignment. The writer had even found other examples, 3 different firms that had made similar mistakes after pushing out their procedural people. Each had lost millions within 6 months. But the article's brilliance was in its final section, a profile of unnamed analysts who'd tried to prevent these disasters, only to be labeled as not leadership material, or too rigid, or not culture fits. My phone exploded with notifications. The article was everywhere: LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit. The hashtag Gisan's Rachel was right appeared within an hour, though I had no idea who started it. By noon, it was trending. Marcus Wright called me into his office at Slate. "Impressive piece," he said, gesturing to his monitor. "Anonymous sources, but remarkably well-informed. It's an important topic. Too many firms undervalue systematic analysis." "Indeed." He leaned back. I particularly enjoyed the quote about how some executives think spreadsheets are less important than speaker fees. That had been my touch, a reference to Tara's $50,000 speaking engagement rate, which she'd bragged about constantly. The market response has been significant. Marcus continued. "I've had 3 firms call this morning asking if we could recommend risk assessment consultants. Seems everyone suddenly wants their own procedural people. Funny how that works." Hilarious. By the way, Lockridge's interim CEO reached out. They want to hire Slate to review their processes. I told them we had a conflict of interest, given that we'd hired their former deputy director of strategy. I kept my face neutral. That seems appropriate. I suggested they might want to develop their own expertise internally. Perhaps hire people who value thorough analysis over social media metrics. Novel concept. That afternoon, the story took on a life of its own. Financial Twitter dissected every paragraph, finding new parallels to recent venture disasters. Someone created a procedural people appreciation LinkedIn group that gained 10,000 members in 6 hours. Then came the memes. Ethan's headshot photoshopped onto a sinking ship with "but the vibes were good" in impact font. A Drake meme rejecting "due diligence for trust me bro." Tara's podcast logo redesigned as "finance backward." But the coup de grace came from an unexpected source. Diane Morrison, the legendary VC who'd built Greystone Partners from nothing to $2 billion under management, posted a LinkedIn article. "In my 30 years in venture capital, I've seen every trend, every fad, every disruption of traditional practices. But one thing remains constant. The analysts who save you from catastrophic losses are never the charismatic visionaries. They're the quiet ones with Excel shortcuts memorized, who read every footnote, who ask uncomfortable questions in due diligence calls. We call them procedural people, like it's an insult. Like following processes that prevent fraud is somehow less valuable than having energy or vision. I've watched 3 firms implode this year because they replaced their procedural people with influencers. Each thought they were innovating. Each learned that gravity doesn't care about your Instagram followers. To every analyst reading this who's been told you're not leadership material because you insist on actual financial projections, you are the backbone of this industry. Without you, we're just gamblers with MBAs. Rachel was right. The post got 50,000 reactions in 4 hours. Sandra texted me screenshots of Lockridge's internal Slack melting down. Employees were sharing the article, adding their own horror stories about ignored warnings and dismissed concerns. Someone leaked that 3 more investments from Ethan's era were under SEC scrutiny. By Wednesday, the story had jumped from trade publications to mainstream media. The New York Times ran a piece on the Instagramification of investment banking. The Wall Street Journal published an op-ed titled, "When Clout Scores Replace Credit Scores." CNN wanted interviews. CNBC was preparing a segment. Everyone wanted to know who Rachel was. I declined everything, letting the mystery build. Marcus supported my decision completely. Slate was getting tremendous publicity just from having hired me. Their inbox was full of LPs wanting to invest with a firm that clearly valued proper risk assessment. Thursday brought my favorite development. A junior analyst at Lockridge, someone I'd mentored briefly, posted a LinkedIn article. What I learned from Rachel Monroe. She detailed how I'd taught her to build financial models, how to spot irregularities in pitch decks, how to ask the questions founders didn't want to answer. She described watching me work 16-hour days to protect the firm's investments, only to be dismissed as too procedural. Rachel saved Lockridge millions over her 12 years, she wrote. They lost $2.2 million within 48 hours of ignoring her final warning. Do the math on which approach creates more value. The post went viral within the venture community. Other analysts started sharing their own stories of dismissed warnings and ignored expertise. Procedural people became a badge of honor. By Friday, someone had made t-shirts. Procedural person in simple Helvetica, with spreadsheets save money underneath. They sold out in 6 hours. Jared called that evening. You see the news about Ethan? What now? He's being personally sued by 2 LPs, breach of fiduciary duty. Apparently, there are emails showing he explicitly ignored risk assessments to push through investments from people in his network. Shocking. The beautiful irony. His lawyer advised him to settle quickly. Turns out fighting the case would require extensive documentation of his decision-making process. The kind of documentation procedural people create. And visionaries don't. Exactly. He's fucked, Rachel. Properly, thoroughly fucked. I thought about Ethan in that conference room, dismissing 12 years of expertise with a wave of his hand. You're not really the leadership type, Rachel. Good, I said. Maybe next time he'll value people who actually know how to do the work. There won't be a next time. Word is he's moving back to New York. Plans to pursue other opportunities. Which is code for nobody will hire him. Not to run money. Maybe he can start a podcast with Tara. We both laughed at that. That night, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Chief Risk Officer at Slate Capital. 15,000 views in an hour. Messages from headhunters, reporters, old colleagues finally brave enough to reach out. I archived them all. The point had been made. Procedural people matter. Spreadsheets matter. Boring, thorough. Systematic analysis matters. And anyone who thinks otherwise can enjoy their $2.2 million lesson. Saturday evening, 1 week after the article dropped, Charlotte's financial district stood empty except for the occasional Uber picking up junior analysts from their weekend catch-up sessions. I should have been celebrating. Slate had just closed a major deal I'd identified and vetted. My reputation was golden. The industry had learned a $2.2 million lesson about valuing substance over style. But I knew one more scene had to play out. My phone buzzed. Patricia Huang. Rachel, I'm sorry to call on the weekend. Have you seen the final board report? No. Ethan's gone. Tara too, obviously. But that's not why I'm calling. She paused. The forensic audit found more issues. 7 investments, all pushed through by Ethan against protocol. Total exposure, $8.7 million. Jesus, even I hadn't suspected it was that bad. The board wanted you to know, Patricia continued, that every investment you flagged as high risk has either failed or is under investigation. Every single one. I see. Your final risk assessment, the one Ethan dismissed. It could have saved us everything. Rachel, I need to apologize, not as a board member, but personally. We failed you catastrophically. Apologies don't undo the damage, Patricia. No, they don't. Her voice cracked slightly. For what it's worth, your example has changed how I'll evaluate leadership going forward. The board has implemented mandatory risk assessment protocols. No investment moves without proper due diligence. We're calling it the Monroe Standard. The Monroe Standard? I almost laughed. That's something, I suppose. It's not enough. I know that. But I wanted you to hear it from me. After we hung up, I walked to my home office window. Same view I'd been staring at for weeks. But it looked different now. Clearer, maybe. Or maybe I was just seeing it from a position of strength instead of desperation. My laptop dinged. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: Thank you. Ms. Monroe. You don't know me, but I'm a junior analyst at Pemberton Capital. Last month, my boss wanted to invest in a revolutionary startup that felt wrong to me. All vibes, no verification. I remembered your story and pushed back. Did the boring work. Found fraud indicators. The deal died. My boss was furious initially. Then the founder was arrested yesterday for running a Ponzi scheme. I still have my job. The firm still has its $3.4 million. Thank you for showing us that procedural people matter. Another spreadsheet revolutionary. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Jared with a single line. Worth it. Monday morning came with unusual clarity. I arrived at Slate's offices early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The work felt different when people actually valued it. Marcus found me reviewing a biotech proposal at 7 a.m. You know, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I've been in this business 25 years. I've never seen someone destroy a firm so thoroughly without firing a single shot. I didn't destroy anything. They lit the match. I just documented the fire. Poetic. He studied me. Any regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. The 12 years at Lockridge. The relationships lost. The bridges burned. No, they made their choice when they decided Instagram followers mattered more than investment fundamentals. I just helped the market reach its natural conclusion. Yours. And if they'd kept you? If Ethan had listened? Then Cryptosphere would have been flagged, the investment killed, and Lockridge would have dodged a bullet. Ethan would still be CEO. Tara would still be pretending expertise. And the next analyst who raised uncomfortable truths would be the one getting fired. So really, you did the industry a favor. The industry did itself a favor. I just held up a mirror. That afternoon, I got one last text from Sandra. Liquidation sale in the conference room. They're selling everything, even the furniture. The table where you gave your last presentation, someone bought it for $50. The table where Ethan had pronounced me too procedural while checking his phone. Where board members had studied their coffee rather than defend 12 years of excellence. Where my career at Lockridge had ended with security escorts and legal threats. $50. I forwarded the text to Jared with 2 words. Perfect ending. He replied immediately, wrong. Perfect ending is you thriving while they scramble to understand what happened. But he was wrong too. The perfect ending wasn't about me or them. The perfect ending was every analyst who'd read that article and realized their spreadsheets weren't the problem. Every junior employee who'd push back against vision without verification. Every firm that would think twice before dismissing their procedural people. The perfect ending was the Monroe Standard becoming industry best practice. Late that evening, alone in my office at Slate, I pulled up the infamous conference room C photo one last time. Ethan, mid-dismissal, his hand literally waving away my analysis. Board members avoiding eye contact. Me, standing with perfect posture. Knowing I was right but powerless to make them see it. I deleted it. Didn't need it anymore. The market had delivered its verdict. $2.2 million in 48 hours. The procedural people had won. And somewhere in Charlotte's financial district, in an empty conference room being stripped for parts, the ghost of culture fit was finally, mercifully, dead. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What's your own experience with being undervalued at work?